2015. Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so today we're going to be taking Sutta number 142 in the Majjhima Nikaya. This is called the Dakkhiavibhanga Sutta. We are on page 1102. So the Dakkhiavibhanga Sutta, which is translated here as the Exposition of Offerings. But again, I think Vibhanga is best understood as analysis, making divisions. And so we could say the analysis of offerings. And here the key word is the word in the title, Dakkhina, which suggests something more than just giving a gift. But Dakkhina, the idea of Dakkhina, I think it originated in pre-Buddhist times amongst the Brahmins, and it's the idea of gifts that are given particularly in sacrifice in order to acquire merits. And so the idea that prevailed amongst the old ideal that prevails in the Vedas is that the way to acquire merits is by making sacrifices. And these would be sacrifices of grain from the harvest, and even amongst the Brahmins, the early Brahmins, of animals, so animal sacrifices. And the Buddha distinctly rejects the idea of animal sacrifices as a way of acquiring merit, and he even dismisses the idea of making sacrifices of things that are like grain and fruits. And he redefines the idea of sacrifice in terms of making offerings to those who are considered spiritually worthy as a way of generating merit. I'll come back to the idea of merit here, but I just wanted to pick up one sutta which shows the contrast between the old idea of sacrifice, the way it was understood in Brahmanism, and the way the Buddha has taken these terms and given a new slant to them, or portray them from a different perspective. Okay, this comes from the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha. It's in the Kosala Samyutta. These are the discourses given to the king of Kosala. And so it's said that at the time the sutta takes place, the king Pasenadi of Kosala had been making arrangements for a great sacrifice in which 500 bulls, 500 different kinds of cows, 500 goats, and so on, had been set up for the sacrifice. Okay, then the monks observe this when they go on their alms round, and they report it to the Buddha. And then the Buddha says that, he speaks in verse here, and he says that the horse sacrifice, human sacrifice, and he mentions some other sacrifices. These sacrifices, fraught with violence, do not bring great fruit. The great rishis, or seers of right conduct, do not attend that sacrifice where animals of various kinds are slain. But those sacrifices free from violence, where no animals are slain, the great rishis attend a sacrifice like this. So a wise person should offer this, a sacrifice bringing great fruit. For one who makes such sacrifice, it is indeed better, never worse. Such a sacrifice is truly vast, and the deities too are pleased. Actually, the sutta doesn't mention expressly what kind of sacrifice is intended here, but what the Buddha intends from other suttas, we know that it would be a great alms offering, an offering of alms, particularly to the Sangha, to the order of monks and nuns. Okay, so we have the concept of dakkina here, which means an offering which is given with the intention of generating merit. And so now this brings me to the word merit, which is rendered a rendering into English of the Pali word punya. Or Sanskrit punya. And what lies behind the concept of merit is the idea that as we move from life to life within samsara, our destiny is determined by our karma. And karma is distinguished into two broad categories of unwholesome karma and wholesome karma. Unwholesome karma is action that is motivated by the bad roots of greed, hatred, and ignorance. And wholesome karma is good karma, actions that are motivated by the three good roots of generosity, kindness, and wisdom or understanding. Okay, as we move from samsara, or as we move from life to life within samsara, until one reaches final liberation, it's important to establish the conditions for meeting with what I would call good fortune in one's future existences. By good fortune, I would mean birth into a country in which there are relatively peaceful conditions, a relative degree of material prosperity, conditions such as one can obtain a good education, prospects for employment, smooth and fulfilling personal relationships. So these are some of the fruits, the mundane fruits of good karma. And the good karma that secures these fruits, considered from the perspective of its capacity to produce these fruits, is what is called merit. I don't quite like the English word merit because it suggests that, that there's somebody standing there with a scoreboard, who is going, okay, he gave a gift to that monk, he gets 1 point. He helped to mitigate a conflict between those people, he gets 2. Okay, he did that good deed, 4, 5. So it's like, you get the picture of like scoring up, making a score, or putting money into a bank account. But we could consider merit as formations that are created within the stream of consciousness, karmic formations, which have a potency to come to fruition, first at the mundane level, by producing desirable results as one moves from one existence to another existence. But merit is also considered not only to be the basis for good fortune at a mundane level within the round of rebirths, but merit is also considered to be one of the primary supports for liberation, for realization and liberation. And so in order to be able to advance, through one's spiritual practice, up to the level where one can attain the meditative absorptions, the stages of insight, the stages of penetration and realization, the paths, what are called the paths and fruits of realization, one needs an accumulation of merit. And sometimes it's said that the two sort of main supports for liberation, for awakening or enlightenment, they speak about the accumulation of merit. Well, I don't have to write this. The accumulation of merit and the accumulation of wisdom or understanding. And so through certain practices, we could say have an emphasis, within certain practices there's an emphasis on generating merit and building up a store of merit. Whereas other practices, the emphasis is on building up one's understanding, one's wisdom, one's knowledge. And there's a tendency within Western Buddhism to dismiss the idea of merit. Like one thinks like, I don't need merit, I don't want merit. That's just something for people with worldly ambitions. But the Buddha puts a lot of emphasis, you could say, especially in his discourses to lay people, on acquiring merits in this life. One sees this repeatedly in the connected discourses to the king of Kosala that I just referred to. For example, King Pasenadi of Kosala comes to the Buddha and he says, Bhante, while I was alone in seclusion, I thought, who treat themselves as dear and who treat themselves as a foe? Then the Buddha says, those who engage in misconduct by body, speech, and mind treat themselves as a foe, that is, as an enemy. Whereas those who engage in good conduct of body, speech, and mind treat themselves as dear, as a friend. And then he says in the verses, he says, both the merits and the evil that a person does right here, this is what is truly one's own. This is what one takes when one goes, when one passes on. This is what follows one along like a shadow that never departs. Therefore, one should do what is good here and now as a collection for the future life. Merits are the support for living beings when they arise in the other world. So this is, I would say, a very important idea. And this couplet, that merits are the support for living beings when they arise in the other world, this couplet appears again and again in the suttas. And so the word, I think the word Pali word is patita. It's a foundation, a basis on which one stands. So in order to stand securely as one goes from life to life, it's important to perform meritorious deeds. Okay, so now let's go into the sutta itself. Okay, so the sutta takes place when the Buddha has been living in the Sakyan country at the capital of Kapilavatthu. And this was the Buddha's own native land. And Kapilavatthu, or Sanskrit Kapilavastu, this was the city in which the Buddha was born and grew up. Okay, then on this occasion, Mahapajapati Gautami took a new, I'm reading from the text now, took a new pair of cloths and went to the Buddha. And then after paying homage to him, then she said to the Blessed One, she said, "This new pair of cloths has been spun by me, woven by me, especially for the Blessed One. Let the Blessed One accept it from me out of compassion." Okay, so the sutta introduces, right after the opening line, it introduces a person who is known by the name of Mahapajapati Gautami. And who is Mahapajapati Gautami? Okay, the Buddha, first, the Buddha's father was named King Suddhodana. And King Suddhodana, this is the legend. The Sakyan state was actually not a monarchy. It didn't have a king, but it was a kind of aristocratic republic. And so the Sakyans were an aristocratic clan, and Suddhodana might have been like the president of the council. Later tradition, in order to sort of glorify the Buddha turns the Sakyan state into a kingship with Suddhodana as the king, a mighty king, and Siddhartha, his son, who's to become the Buddha, as the designated prince. What's the name for the prince who's designated to become the king? Heir apparent, the heir to the throne. And so then we have the Buddha renouncing the throne in order to become a wandering ascetic. Okay, so we say that King Suddhodana was probably a member of the ruling council of the Sakyans. Perhaps he was the president of the council, but not a king. Okay, Suddhodana had two chief wives. One of them, the one who was actually probably his first chief wife, was named Maya, and the other was Mahapajapati Gautami. And Maya was the mother of Siddhartha, who becomes the Buddha. But according to all traditions, Maya died 7 days after Siddhartha was born. And then she was reborn, according to the text, in the Tusita heaven, one of the sense-sphere heavenly realms. Okay, so here's Suddhodana, his chief wife passes away. Who's going to bring up the little baby who's just 7 days old, from infancy up through the time he reaches maturity? So that responsibility devolves on Mahapajapati Gautami. And so she becomes bound to Siddhartha, the Buddha, by two relationships. Okay, even if Maya had lived, she would still be the aunt of Siddhartha. But because Maya passed away, she also takes on the responsibility of being the foster mother of the infant Siddhartha. And now there's something else interesting about Mahapajapati Gautami that reflects on this sutta here. Does anybody here know what else is interesting and important about Mahapajapati Gautami? Exactly. She was the one who became the first, but after the passing away of Suddhodana, up to that time, according to the tradition, there were no bhikkhunis, no ordained Buddhist nuns. And so she was the one who led, we call it a women's rights movement, together with 500, this is a traditional number, 500 Sakyan women came to the Buddha and pleaded with him, Bhante, please allow the going forth, the ordination of women into the Dhamma and Vinaya, into the teaching of the Buddha. And what was the Buddha's response? Don't ask. Second time she asks, third time she asks, no. Then the Buddha, together with the monks, they leave Kapilavatthu and they go to a city in the south called Vesali. And Mahapajapati and the 500 Sakyan women, they shave their heads, they put on ochre-colored robes, and they walk down from Kapilavatthu to Vesali, and again they come to the Buddha and appeal to him 3 times, I think it's 3 times, please allow women to go forth into the homeless life. Buddha, no. Why does the Buddha refuse? In my opinion, it's not that the Buddha is a sexist and wants to exclude women in principle. What are you doing? Excuse me? In fact, this whole passage is rather controversial, and I have some questions about its authenticity. It's being recorded, okay. I have questions about its authenticity. But this is the way the texts have come down, whether they are authentic or not, that we have to look at critically. Okay, so Mahapajapati, together with the 500 Sakyan women, come down to Vesali, ask him 3 times, I think it's 3 times, again for permission for women to go forth into the homeless life. The Buddha declines. Then they come out from the Buddha's cottage. They're standing on the road. They're still dusty from the journey, looking very gloomy. And who comes walking along but Venerable Ananda, the Buddha's personal attendant. And Ananda asked them, why are you so gloomy and you have tears in your eyes? And Mahapajapati Gautami explains to him what has taken place. And then Ananda says, you just wait out here. I'll take care of it. Then Ananda comes in and sees the Buddha, and he makes the request, I think again 3 times. The Buddha says, don't ask Ananda for women to go forth into the homeless life. Then Ananda uses an indirect method. He says, if women go forth, would they be able to achieve the fruit of stream entry, once returning, non-returning? Of course, all of those fruits are accessible to lay people, and their Buddha would have had many lay women disciples who had reached those stages of realization. Then he asked, would women be able to achieve the fruit of arhatship, that is, the 4th stage, the stage of full liberation? And the Buddha says, they can, they would. Then Ananda says, now he's got like 1 argument down. Then he comes up with a 2nd argument that Mahapajapati was so helpful to the Blessed One. When your mother died, she was the one who took care of you. You drank her breast milk. She brought you up just like her own flesh and blood son. And so she was so helpful to you. Shouldn't you help her in return? Okay, with those 2 arguments, the Buddha then laid down 8 conditions, and he said, if let me call her Gautami so I don't have to say that mouthful every time. If Gautami will accept these 8 conditions, that will count as her ordination. In other words, she will become a nun, a fully ordained nun. Then Ananda went to Mahapajapati Gautami and told her the 8 conditions, and she accepted, and thereby she became the first bhikkhuni. And that was the start, the beginning of the Bhikkhuni Sangha. At this point in her biography, it seems to me pretty clear that she is not yet a bhikkhuni, because I think the key here, the clue here, is that she says that this new pair of cloths has been spun by me, woven by me, especially for the Blessed One. And now if she was a fully ordained bhikkhuni, I just don't see her spending her time. These are spinning and weaving cloths, sewing together pieces of cloth in order to make a robe. I could say a bhikkhuni might be doing that and offering it to the Buddha. But the spinning of cloth is a laborious process that requires, I don't have personal experience with it. Does anybody have personal experience spinning cloth? You do. It's a laborious process, isn't it? And
I used to demonstrate it in Portland Manor. It takes a long time.
Did you have an electric machine to do it? You did it with...
Foot action.
Yeah, so it's a laborious process. So I just don't see Mahapajapati Gautami with her nun's robe sitting there at the machine, spinning cloth. But there is, as we will see, there is an anachronism in the sutta, which I said earlier raises in my mind some suspicion about the chronology of the sutta. Okay, so the Buddha, when she offers this pair of cloths to the Buddha says, give it to the Sangha, Gautami. When you give it to the Sangha, both I and the Sangha will be honored. Yeah, then there's a note here that says that the Buddha asked her to give the gift to the Sangha because he wanted her volition of generosity to be directed both to the Sangha and to himself, as the combined volition would yield merit leading to her welfare and happiness for a long time. He also said this so that later generations would be inspired to show respect towards the Sangha, and by supporting the Sangha with the requisites, the material requisites, would contribute to the long life of the teaching. Okay, so when the Buddha says this, and let me just elaborate a little on this note, that it uses the expression, the volition of generosity. And this is the decisive factor in the generation of karma, is the volition or the intention. The word that's used in Pali is the word cetana. So it's the volition, the intention that governs, you could say, or determines the nature of an action. And so, for example, if I'm walking down a path and I step on an ant or an insect and I have no intention of doing so, then there's no volition behind that action. And so it doesn't create any unwholesome karma. Okay, when I give a gift to somebody, what creates the karma is not simply the transference of one object from my own possession to another, but it's the volition that motivates that gift. So in this case, according to the explanation, the commentary, the Buddha wanted Gautami to generate that volition of giving the cloths, making the cloths, offering the cloths to both the Buddha and the Sangha. Of course, if it's a pair of cloths, that raises the question, what's going to happen to the cloths? Because a pair of cloths, suppose there are 50 monks sitting there, a pair of cloths can't be distributed amongst 50 monks. But I think the decisive factor is that the intention, the volition of Gautami would be to offer the cloths both to the Buddha and the Sangha, and then the Sangha would make the decision, how are we going to distribute these cloths? Okay, so this exchange goes on 3 times. Okay, now Ananda again inserts himself into the conversation, and he appeals to the Buddha. He says, let the Blessed One accept the new pair of cloths from Mahapajapati Gautami. She has been very helpful to the Blessed One. As his mother's sister, she was his nurse, his wet nurse, his foster mother, who gave him milk. Again, this is very much the same kind of argument that Ananda used when he was appealing to the Buddha to allow the ordination of women. So she took care of the Buddha when your own mother died. Okay, then he says, Ananda says, that the Blessed One too has been very helpful to Mahapajapati Gautami. And I checked, my friend Venerable Analayo has a book in which he has a study, comparative study, of the suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya with their counterparts from other traditions, particularly the Chinese Agama traditions. And he says that in the Chinese and Tibetan parallels to the sutta, it's Ananda who points out that Gautami has been very helpful to the Buddha, but it is the Buddha who then says, I have been very helpful to Gautami. So that's the Chinese and Tibetan versions, whereas in the Pali version, it's Ananda who points out how the Buddha has been very helpful to Gautami. Okay, and then he mentions a number of ways in which the Buddha has been very helpful to Gautami. So he says that it is owing to the Blessed One that Mahapajapati Gautami has gone for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It is owing to the Blessed One that Gautami abstains from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, false speech, and the use of intoxicants. Okay, so we call these the first two steps in adopting the Buddha's teaching or in following the Buddha's teaching. The first step is always to go for refuge to the three jewels. The second step is to take the 5 precepts. But now Ananda goes further and he says, it is owing to the Blessed One that Gautami possesses unwavering confidence in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, in the Sangha, and that she possesses the virtues loved by the noble ones. And here we come across an important expression that indicates, we call this the spiritual level at which Gautami stands when this sutta takes place. The expression here is avecha pasada. Okay, the expression avecha pasada indicates the confidence of one who has reached at least the stage of a stream enterer. One who, the expression here, avecha, which is translated unwavering, actually comes from a verb which I don't think occurs on its own in the text. Aveti, which means to undergo, to experience. So avecha pasada is confidence, the confidence of one who has undergone the decisive experience of seeing into the truth of the Dhamma. And so it's said that the stream enterer has this unwavering or unbreakable confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and then also possesses what are called the virtues dear to the noble ones or loved by the noble ones. And these are explained in the commentary as the 5 precepts that become, we could say, fixed traits of character in the noble disciple. Sometimes the question comes up, is it possible for a noble disciple to break any of the 5 precepts? This is my own understanding, that while a noble disciple is living in this life, they won't break any of the 5 precepts. But I don't recall any sutta that says that the noble disciple that it's impossible for the noble disciple to break the 5 precepts. So the thought occurs to me, perhaps it's possible that somebody becomes a stream enterer, so they still have several more lives as a human being, or could have several more lives as a human being. So this person gets reborn, they're a child, And maybe as a child playing around, they might take the life of an insect or might tell a little lie. But once they reach the age of maturity and come to understand, at that point they'll understand that they have actually reached the stage of a stream enterer or a higher stage in a previous life. And then those 5 precepts will immediately come up and they will adopt them as their natural behavior. But I think the commentarial tradition is that the stream enterer never breaks the 5 precepts. But whether that's so or not, I don't know. Okay, then it said, it is owing to the Blessed One that Mahapajapati Gautami is free from doubt or perplexity or confusion about dukkha or suffering, about the origin of dukkha, about the cessation of dukkha, about the way leading to the cessation of dukkha. In other words, that she has no doubt at all about the 4 Noble Truths. And the reason that she has no doubt at all about the 4 Noble Truths is because as one who is at minimum a stream enterer, she has seen directly, with experiential insight, she has seen the 4 Noble Truths. And so one of the 3 fetters, which is eradicated by the stream enterer, is in fact doubt about the 4 Noble Truths. So by saying all this, especially by saying that Mahapajapati has this unwavering, unbreakable confidence in the 3 jewels, that she possesses those virtues loved by the Noble Ones, that she is free from doubt about the 4 Noble Truths, Ananda is indicating that it's through the Buddha that Mahapajapati has become at least a stream enterer. Okay, but what's interesting here is that, and this, to my mind, indicates where this sutta will stand on a chronological scale. 2 things would be missing that one would expect. Let's say, what are the 2 things that one would expect if the sutta took place later in the Buddha's teaching career regarding Mahapajapati? I'm not sure if I phrased the question well. Okay, let me not phrase a question, but put it as a statement. If the sutta took place at the time Mahapajapati had become a bhikkhuni, then Ananda would say it's owing to the Blessed One, despite all his resistance, he was the one who still opened up the door. It's owing to the Blessed One that Mahapajapati has become a bhikkhuni, or that she's received monastic ordination. And then another sutta says, very soon after Mahapajapati received bhikkhuni ordination, she achieved arhatship. And so, if the sutta took place at that later point, it would say it's owing to the Blessed One that Mahapajapati has achieved arhatship, or that her mind has been liberated from all defilements, or that she has eliminated the 10 fetters, or something like that. But it stops at the level of somebody who might be a stream enterer or once returner. Okay, then when Ananda says this, then the Buddha confirms it and then says that when owing to one person, another person is gone for refuge to the three jewels, undertakes the five precepts, gains unwavering confidence in the triple gem, and becomes free from doubt about the Four Noble Truths, then it is not easy for that person to repay the other by paying homage, rising up, salutation, polite services, and providing robes, alms, food, dwelling places, and medicinal requisites. Okay, any questions at this point? Any questions, comments? Well, I thought I was touching on some controversial issues here. Okay, Tsering. Yeah. You have to speak a little more loud. Yeah, speak